The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
On this week's CourtTV podcast, we've heard the first week of testimony in the prosecution's case against accused George Floyd killer Derek Chauvin, and it was filled with dramatic moments and revelations. CourtTV's Michael Ayala returns to the podcast to talk about 5 of the biggest moments from the trial so far.
This is the CourtTV podcast with Vinnie Politan.
Welcome to the CourtTV podcast. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks so much for downloading and listening. And we at CourtTV are in the midst of the case against Derek Chauvin, the man accused of murdering George Floyd. And each day has been important in this case. And, sometimes there are trials where, there's days like, nothing really happened. Today's not that important. It's kind of stuck. No, every day, important witnesses have taken the stand. It's been emotional. It's been riveting. And I don't know where the case is going. We never know till the end. But I want to bring in Michael Ayala, my colleague at CourtTV, fellow anchor. We were both with the original CourtTV, with the rebooted CourtTV. Michael, I'm pretty amazed with this trial that each day we've been inside and watching our cameras inside, watching what's happening. There's been important stuff happening, and every witness seems to say something extremely significant, and I am fascinated by what's going on in that courtroom.
Yeah, Vinny, it's really been a tour de force in terms of trial management, because it's not that easy when you go to try a case and organizing your witnesses, putting them out in the correct order to keep the jury interested, making sure that you're keeping your questioning tight. There were a couple of times where perhaps they went on a little long about certain witnesses' backgrounds or whatever, but at the end of the day, you're right. Just about every witness that's taken the stand has had something important to add to this case. And if not, they had something extremely emotional to say to add to sort of the overall feeling about the case.
All right, we're in the midst of it, and as we are recording now, witness, they're in a break in court, but they're getting ready to put more witnesses on the stand. I want to focus on 5 big witnesses so far that we have seen in this case, and I want to begin with a man named Donald Williams, one of the bystanders. He was the one who was probably most vocal, the one you might remember the most from watching or listening to that viral video and hearing his voice pleading with police. Let's take a listen to the testimony of Donald Williams.
Again, you made a statement to Agents Garvey and Eckert and in that statement you said,
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this form of cross-examination.
Overruled.
What,
Overruled. Proceed.
in that statement you said, like, I really wanted to beat the shit out of the police officers.
Mm-hmm.
You said that.
Yeah, I did. That's what I felt.
You were angry.
No, you can't paint me out as angry. I was in a position where I had to be controlled, of controlled professionalism. I wasn't angry because I stayed on the curb.
Object is non-responsive.
All right, that's the cross-examination of Donald Williams, and this guy has an amazing background, number one. But I just wanted to put a little context. The defense is trying to take the bystanders who were there and argue to this jury ultimately that they were an angry group of people, they were a potential threat, and they were a diversion and distraction for Officer Chauvin, and perhaps the reason why his knee remained on his back or on his neck for those 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And they tried to lay the groundwork there, Michael, by trying to paint Donald Williams as an angry man, a threatening man.
An angry black man. You can say it, Vinny. It's fair. Yeah, no question about it. At the end of the day, that's their defense, and they're doing the best they can. I think we've talked about it. It's going to be tough based on video evidence to make that defense fly. But if they are, he's a poster boy for it, because not only was he physically moving towards the scene and had to be told to get back, I think Officer Tao even had to put his hand on him for a second, to which point Donald Williams told him, "Get your hands off me." and he would back up. And so he certainly was listening to commands, but he was someone who was trying to enter that scene, that stage area. Eric Nelson, I think, did a decent job of trying to upset him in the courtroom. What you heard there was just a small snippet of him trying to upset Donald Williams in the courtroom. And I think it was relatively successful to show that he can be agitated under the right circumstances, which I think was a nice sort of visual for the jury in terms of supporting Nelson's theory of the case.
And Donald Williams is a guy who got on the witness stand and was more than just a witness. He was almost became an expert because he's trained. He was a wrestler in high school and I think in college, and then became an MMA guy, mixed martial arts. And he was testifying about what he was observing the defendant, the accused murderer, Derek Chauvin, doing to George Floyd.
Yeah, and I think his testimony on direct was very important for the prosecution, because as you said, the judge allowed him to testify about what he saw and to opine on what he thought Derek Chauvin was doing. And he talked about something called a shimmy. Now, I'm also a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and a shimmy, he explained it very well in the courtroom, that you could see one point where Chauvin seems to put more pressure, takes his weight, puts it onto the neck, and seems to be digging his knee into the neck to get a closer and tighter sort of push against that sort of carotid artery, which is what puts somebody out and cuts off the airflow. And he said, well, I could see it. The judge let him testify to that. And I thought it was important testimony because when we talk about proving intent, I think that's one of the areas that on closing arguments, the prosecution is going to say, a number of things prove intent, but that being one of them as well, because there were a couple of other witnesses who testified similarly.
And I've never seen this before in a trial where ordinary witnesses become quasi-experts, and we've seen it in more than one of the bystanders and other people who are taking the stand throughout. Do you feel that Donald Williams, because what I saw in his eyes and the way he was testifying, he likes to spar, right? He's a guy who's a wrestler. He's a competitor. And I saw him kind of take that posture when he was being cross-examined. Like, okay, I know he's coming at me. I'm ready for him. How do you think the jury reads that? Do they read that as they kind of like this guy because he's ready to do battle? Or do they look at him as someone who maybe has an agenda and you've got to look at the credibility of what he's saying?
It's tough, Vinny. I think that has a lot to do with where you come from, right? I loved him, right? Because I kind of come from that mindset, you know, where you're challenged, so you step up to the challenge. And I think that's how he came across. I think if you're not used to that kind of thing, you can look at a guy like that and think, oh, he can be a little dangerous. He's a little angry. He's somebody we got to be careful with. But at the end of the day, if you kind of know that guy, and I kind of know the Donald Williamses, you know, they're tough guys. And one of the things that I think put him in a position to be so angry as to what he was seeing was he thought that there was someone who was in a compromised position being treated in a really bad way. And I think that upset him because as much as he's a fighter, he's not a guy that's going to go pick on a weak guy. He's the guy that's going to protect the weak guy. And I think that's what he was feeling at that scene. So I think at the end of the day, overall, it was a net positive.
Yeah, I just found him to be an incredibly interesting person who has an amazing, incredible background and just perspective and way of looking at things. So clearly kept my interest. We'll see what the jury does with it. Another witness, another one of the bystanders, and you know, Donald Williams was the loudest and the one that I remembered from the video. But then there's the bystander who actually shot the video. Her name is Darnella. She was only 17 when she shot the video, and that is what really started this entire case. She took the witness stand, and it was emotional. We didn't get to see her on camera, but we got to hear her. And even just hearing her voice, like you're going to hear in just a second, to me was a very moving part of this case so far and kind of put a lot of perspective into what it's really about. Let's take a listen.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done. He
Thank
should
you,
have.
Doc.
That's the answer. Thank you.
Okay.
That's real emotion. You can, skeptics out there can talk about sometimes in the trials we cover on Court TV, not tears, no, that's real. What I just heard was real. A 17-year-old who witnessed a man die and knows that she is the one who took that video, and feeling almost like survivor's guilt, Michael, is what I'm getting from her and some of the other bystanders who were there that day. But clearly, there's nothing they could have done. You can't physically intervene. That it would have gotten much, much worse.
Vinny, I don't think I've ever heard testimony as real, as emotional, as devastating as that. I mean, when we talk about this trial 20 years from now, her testimony is going to be what we talk about. I thought her testimony was incredibly real, incredibly emotional, incredibly important. Important in the sense that, number one, from a legal standpoint, she was a minor. So Derek Chauvin committing a crime in front of a minor allows the prosecution to ask for a higher or upward departure in the sentencing. So if he's convicted, that's on the table. But in another sense, I thought she was important because I think there are people on the jury who may have struggled with the entire Black Lives Matter movement and some of the things that happened in the aftermath of the death. And I think her testimony galvanized what this case was about, why there was so much anger, why the Black community responded the way they did. I think it crystallized that for them. It let them know exactly what was at stake in this trial and why just about every Black American watches that video and has and feels a certain way about that video. Whereas perhaps other folks might not feel the same way. And I think she galvanized that perfectly and I think probably was the most important of the bystander witnesses in that sense.
And my takeaway from that was the feeling of helplessness, that there was nothing I could do in that situation. And she did what she could by recording the video, and then the video goes viral, and then we end up here with this trial. Without the bystander videos, I think there's a big question mark as to how this all would have resolved. What would have happened?
No, there's no
we
question.
We just don't know.
There's no question mark, Vinny. This case would not have been prosecuted if there was no video. No question about it.
Well, I can't go that far.
I'm going that
I absolutely
far.
can't.
That's why
I can't go that far because there's body cameras and there's an officer involved death and there's going to be an investigation. So I just don't know the politics of the internal investigations in. The problem is it doesn't become a viral video. The outrage of the nation and the world is not sort of, galvanized that way. So I'm not sure without that kind of pressure, this goes down the way it went down. This would have been internally investigated. And it would have taken months and months, and they would have done what they normally do in these circumstances. So I'm skeptical. I'll go that far. And as far as the survivor's guilt that you described, I think it goes so far, Vinny, as to be PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I think the prosecutor's office, they have counseling services. I sure hope all of those victims who seem to have expressed this kind of feeling, we saw this in a few of them, I hope they're all getting help because that stuff doesn't go away. It sits inside and it really just festers, can become something a lot worse if it's not dealt with. So I'm hoping they're getting some help and talking to someone about it. And to put it in perspective, you think about the way just watching the video has impacted people. All these bystanders, I mean, they witnessed it firsthand. They were there. They saw in real time what was happening. Another one of the bystanders who testified is a woman named Genevieve Hansen, and another one of these interesting bystanders who's walking by because she's a firefighter. She's a trained EMT, and she tried to intervene. Let's take a listen to some of the testimony from Genevieve Hansen.
Do you remember what kinds of things they were saying?
No, I was pretty focused on trying to get the officers to let me help.
And how were you doing that, trying to get the officers to focus on you and get help?
I think in my memory, I tried different tactics of calm and reasoning. I tried to be assertive. I pled and was desperate.
So this is a bystander who is trained to help and to save people. She saw something that was going on that was terribly wrong, and she tried to intervene. And we've seen her in the video. And again, Tu Tao, who's the one who's doing crowd control, is the one who keeps her from intervening. I've spoken to police officers, and even ones who agree with prosecutors in this case, which is most police officers that I've interviewed, would not have allowed, an EMT out of uniform to intervene here anyway. But how do you think that issue plays? Because for a lot of people, they're like, well, you should have let her intervene. She was a firefighter. Let her in there.
Yeah, I think, interacting with the folks on social media, friends of mine as well, all felt that same way. Why didn't they let her in? And I agree. I think it's very understandable that they didn't let her in. And Nelson was sure to ask her, she appeared in court very differently than she did at the scene. She was in a sweatsuit at the scene, very clearly on the video. In court, she appeared in her dress uniform. He made sure to say, hey, you weren't wearing that uniform that day, correct? So the officers couldn't identify her through the uniform. Then he also asked her, did she have ID that day, that she was an EMT? And she had to answer, no, she did not have ID. So without ID, without the uniform, no way the police know who she is, what she's capable of, no matter what she says. And to let her into the scene not only puts them in danger, puts her in danger as well in the mindset of a police officer who is what they call staging a scene, trying to keep the scene safe. So no problem there. What she does provide is someone who has a modicum of medical training, able to clearly see that there was a problem and able to identify that someone was in distress very clearly and notified the police officers, even if you don't want to believe that she has that background or whatever, she is letting them know that he is in distress, please do something, and they still don't. So she was valuable in that sense as well.
There was a point, though, in cross-examination, her demeanor changed a lot. She was clearly, again, another one of the witnesses who was doing a little bit of battle with the defense. But there was a point where Eric Nelson, the attorney for Derek Chauvin, was going through the timeline of when the EMS was called and when this became a Code 3. And she did not believe the timeline that Eric Nelson laid out when he said it had been 6 minutes since a Code 3 was called in and EMS still had not responded. And she says, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And to me, that could be potentially down the road a major point for the defense here, in that the EMS, for whatever reason, responded to the scene much more slowly than they normally would, because Genevieve Hansen, who works as an EMT firefighter, said, Code 3, they're there in 2 or 3 minutes. And she had been, when she got on scene, the Code 3 call had gone in like 5 or 6 minutes before she was even on scene. And she found it hard to believe that they had not responded yet.
Yeah, because she, I guess, works in a nearby firehouse. And her point was they were close enough that if they got a Code 3 type call, they would have been there in 2 to 3 minutes because they were close enough by. And the fact that it was taking 6 to 7 to 8 minutes, whatever it was, didn't make any sense to her at that point. And you're right. I mean, that becomes an issue. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, they initially made that Code 2 call, which is, take your time. We just have a situation. We're probably going to need you. Get here when you can, which was then upgraded a few minutes later to the Code 3. And Nelson later on in the trial actually played a little bit of audio from the scene where the cops actually tell the bystanders, hey, we're waiting for an ambulance. And so, that's going to be a big part of that defense. So you're right. It could become an issue.
All right. We've got some more testimony to go through, some more moments from some important witnesses who testified. We're going to continue to do that. Again, folks, Court TV is covering this case gavel to gavel, so make sure you're tuning in to watch all of this live. We'll be right back.
For more Court TV, watch it on cable, over the air, Roku, or go to CourtTV.com and stream live gavel-to-gavel coverage. Catch up on the big moments from our current cases and relive some of Court TV's most historic trials. Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
We're taking a listen to so far 5 really important witnesses who have testified. But as we've been saying, I mean, each day in the course of this trial against Derek Chauvin, the man accused of murdering George Floyd, there's been important witnesses and issues. And it's interesting to watch the way the defense is trying to slowly build their case through the prosecution case. But some of these witnesses are just steamrolling through, and it's hard for the defense to get a lot of traction so far, to say the least. Michael Ayala is still with me. Michael, before we listen to the next witness, I want to talk about his background a little bit. This is another interesting man. His name is Charles McMillan, and I refer to him as bystander number 1. He's the first one to really show up. But another interesting guy with an interesting outlook on life and the way he has seen things. How would you describe Charles McMillan?
You know, Charles McMillan, if you grew up in sort of a rough neighborhood, there's always a Charles McMillan, right? A Charles McMillan is the guy that knows everybody. He kind of knows everybody's business. As a matter of fact, he even testified that he stopped to watch because he was being nosy. Right, he kind of knows everybody's business, knows the local officer if there happens to be one, or officers that may respond to the area. Said that he knew Derek Chauvin, and everybody kind of respects him. And he probably had a little trouble back in his early life and turned it around and has a real interesting perspective. And I think that's how he played to me on this scene. A guy who loves his neighborhood, loves his neighbors. Has been through a lot, but and now he's had to witness something that I think. He just never would have expected. And I mean, growing up that way, I would imagine he's seen some things, but I think this just took it to another level, and he had a hard time with it. And it was probably one of the, more emotional moments of this trial.
It really was. And he broke down, absolutely broke down. And this is a man who has seen a lot in his lifetime and broke down. And I would play the clip for you right here on the podcast, but there's moments of nothing because he can't say anything. He can't do anything. And you see this man who is, again, watching the video in front of this jury and is having a difficult time handling it. And again, he saw it in real time as well. And his perspective, when he first showed up, he's trying to get George Floyd to cooperate because he's in handcuffs. Come on, just go. There's nowhere to go right now. You just got to, it's over. And then when he sees what's transpiring, he then starts talking to police. Like, listen, come on, guys, you got to do something here. So he comes. I think he comes to the witness stand as someone who doesn't have an agenda, who's someone who sees both perspectives of what happened here. And to me, gives him a level of credibility. Let's take a listen.
There are also, before that, some statements about you can't win, get up and get in the car. Was that also you?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, was that what you were describing earlier, just trying to help with him? Could you describe what you were trying to do at that point?
Basically what I'm saying to him, he can't win because once, like I said before, once the police get the cops on you, you can't win. So I'm trying to tell him just cooperate with him, get up if you can, get in the car, go with him, you can win.
And did he say I can't to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you understand him to be talking to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were saying, your knee on his neck, what were you concerned in that moment?
Yes, ma'am.
And why was that?
Because he started saying I can't breathe, my stomach hurt. He's saying things that make me believe that he's in trouble.
When you say in trouble, what do you mean by that?
He's gonna die.
Watching and listening to him in the video, he's the first one to approach the scene, and he's trying to make everything go smoothly. He's trying so hard because in his life he knows things can go bad. And this went as bad as it can go. And to me, that adds to his credibility. Everything he says just seems okay. He's making sense to me, Michael.
Yeah, he's the mayor. He's the mayor of the neighborhood. He wants everyone to be okay. Doesn't want to see anyone hurt. Feels for George. He's trying to talk to him and say, look, I know the cops have a job to do and they got it. They got you, brother. Get in the car, take care of it. You'll deal with it at another time. This is not the time or place, because he knows, of course, you've got these cops around you. Things can go bad relatively quickly. And he knows it. And slowly but surely, he's watching it unfold in front of him. And again, the sense of helplessness kicks in. This idea that they can't do anything to help this man. I think it's important testimony, not only from that standpoint, but also from the standpoint that, George Floyd is speaking to him, someone who's not a police officer, saying the same things that he's physically exhibiting. The fact that I'm not trying to win, I just can't. I can't go in this car. Again, these are things that were within earshot of the police officers. They see it. He's then questioning them as well. Someone who's just a layperson, someone who knows the area, who just a few minutes ago was on their side saying, hey, get in the car with these guys, you'll deal with it later. Then later he's telling them, look, what are you doing? He's in distress. You need to change the way you're approaching it. So, I don't think you could do a lot better than Charles McMillan.
And for the defense, this is a witness you just stay away from. There's no reason to question him. He said what he said. They may be able to talk about, the beginning of what he witnessed and George Floyd not getting into the car and not making this thing just end right then. They may use that, but they wanted him off the stand as quickly as possible because that emotion was so real. And we keep saying that. And there was a lot of that in the prosecution case, which is surprising because sometimes in these murder trials we cover, Michael, there's almost this lack of emotion that it's difficult for prosecutors to make the victim real inside the courtroom and make them a real person because of the nature of those cases. This one is the exact opposite because there are people there that are experiencing this. They are reliving this. And as a result, the jury is living through this.
It didn't surprise me, Vinny, because there's a reason that this viral video caused a worldwide movement. Because what you see on that video is devastating. And you watch it and you cannot understand it. And, the defense is doing their best to have folks understand it, but it's difficult to understand. So when you talk about someone witnessing it with their own eyes and being close enough to maybe have had affect the outcome and not be able to or feel as though they couldn't or be stopped from doing that, that's devastating. So it didn't surprise me at all. But I'll tell you this, Charles McMillan may end up being important in the defense's case for one reason. After things are all over, Charles talks to Derek Chauvin and asks him about what happened. And the only, Derek Chauvin, I doubt, is going to take the stand, but he testifies in that video when he responds to Charles McMillan, when he says, I had to hold him down. He's a big guy. And it shows that perhaps there wasn't some kind of nefarious intent, that this was what was going on in his mind. Derek Chauvin may not have to take the stand, but on that video in his conversation with Charles McMillan, he may be testifying for this jury.
Yeah, and that's the closest that we may get to any statement by Chauvin about what he's thinking. That's a huge point. That's a huge point. It's difficult to gauge because the one thing that the defense is not doing in this case, which some defense attorneys do, which is when they're making the big points, they're like really hitting them. So like everyone understands, oh yeah, this is a big thing. But there's been lots of little points that or maybe potentially big points he's made, but they're all being done sort of in a continuum with everything else. So it's almost like flatlining across the entire case that we don't know when something big is really happening for the defense. Maybe he pulls it all together in his closing argument. Maybe that's his strategy. Maybe that's his rope-a-dope style. I don't know. We shall see. Speaking of witnesses, the other thing so the bystanders testified and they kind of grouped them together. And then we moved on to the next section of the prosecution case, which is, again, something very unusual, but not unexpected in a case like this because it's a former police officer who is on trial. And you now have a series of police officers from Minneapolis testifying against Derek Chauvin, cop versus cop, including the chief of police. But I want to play a clip from Lieutenant Richard Zimmerman, because he got up there and just his body language, the way he spoke, it was clear to me, and I think everyone in that courtroom, that he believed what Derek Chauvin did was absolutely ridiculous, was outrageous. Take a listen.
Pulling him down to the ground, face down, and putting your knee on the neck for that amount of time is just uncalled for. I saw no reason why the officers felt they were in danger, if that's what they felt. And that's what they would have to feel to be able to use that kind of force.
So in your opinion, should that restraint have stopped once he was handcuffed and prone on the ground?
Absolutely.
It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And this is a police officer, and you've got a whole series of these police officers, Michael, who were testifying against a cop. And years ago, that might have been something that you would think would be, that would never happen. The blue wall of silence, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the case here, not at all. And to me, Lieutenant Zimmerman really, took it to the next level, because he was looking at it, no, this is ridiculous what he did. There's absolutely there's no gray area here. This is not what you do.
Yeah, he was an interesting witness, Vinny. He's been on the force since '85. He is the most tenured cop in the entire Minneapolis Police Department. He's a lieutenant, right? You don't get to be a lieutenant in a major municipality without being real smart. Okay, so he's very smart. He's also, from my understanding, talking to attorneys out there, someone who testifies a lot in cases, and that came across. His whole demeanor, the way he spoke, the way he said things, how he responded on cross, when he answered, he would turn to the jury, all those things, very, very, very effective. Zimmerman was one of 14 officers who put out a letter condemning what Derek Chauvin did that day. So that takes a tremendous amount of courage. Someone who feels very good about his position, very strong in his position. And in no uncertain terms, he got in that courtroom and said, this guy does not represent anything that we do. What he did that day does not in any way, shape, or form represent anything we're taught, doesn't represent anything that we learn when we're learning how to be police officers. And he's not an expert, he's just a cop. So there's expert testimony, and that comes across one way. But when you have your most tenured cop coming in there saying this, I think it was extremely powerful for the prosecution.
Yeah, when it's cop versus cop, and experts can, police officers can be experts, right? They can but they'll bring in outside experts. You'll have an expert from the LAPDs coming in for the prosecution. The defense will have their own experts, and that is what it is, right? But these are everyday police officers. They all worked together. They were on the same police force. They were co-workers, teammates, however you want to phrase it. And for them to turn on Chauvin, to me, is powerful, because it doesn't happen. How many times have you seen a police officer on trial and you look in the gallery, obviously not in this case because there is no gallery, but you'd see a bunch of officers in their uniforms sitting behind the accused officer, right? That's not happening here, not happening at all, Michael.
No, the support isn't there in that sense. I think the union overall is supporting him. They're certainly paying for his defense. But I think in the rank and file, there are a lot of people who are trying to separate themselves from this situation, knowing that what they saw was something extremely questionable. Again, there's a school of thought that, there's a totality of the circumstances. We're hearing that from the defense. That is their defense, that he was making decisions in real time based on his interpretation of the situation. So there's certainly that to consider. You don't want to convict someone, they're innocent until proven guilty. But certainly there are a lot of people high up in that police department who, Vinny, we can't discount this political aspect of this too, that politically want to separate themselves from Derek Chauvin and what he did that day.
Michael Ayala, always great. I know you got to get back and get ready for the show tonight. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Vinny. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. As Michael and I have gone through here, some powerful witnesses for the prosecution. And it's been a strong case. It's been a real strong case. When prosecutors can bring emotion to the table and can take the jury to the scene, it's important. And it's very compelling. But I will tell you, as I watch all these witnesses take the stand and get off the stand, get on the stand, off the stand, as they piece together this case, there's one big piece that, to me, seems to be missing. And I'll tell you what it is when we come back.
Follow Court TV live over the air, uninterrupted. If you're watching television with an antenna, just rescan your channels now to add Court TV. And go to CourtTV.com to see the exact channel position and more ways to watch Court TV in your area.
So the prosecution has been doing a great job in putting together their case. The jury has seen the video. They've heard from all the bystanders who were there. They recounted what they saw. You've got police officers testifying against police officers and providing their expertise. And everyone's saying, you know, the maneuver that he was doing, this neck restraint, it made no sense. There was no reason for it. And you stop once the resistance stops. You've got him handcuffed. You've got him in a prone position. You've got to roll him on his side. All of this, you got the emergency room doctor testifying about asphyxia. I mean, all of this is strong evidence for the prosecution as they piece together their case, and it should be strong. I mean, think about the one piece of evidence, the video itself, and it's actually a series of videos because of all the body cams as well. But the video is the most powerful piece of evidence that a prosecutor has had in their hands in, I think, my entire career at Court TV. Right? Because this isn't just okay, you've got the smoking gun to a case, whatever it is. But this is a piece of evidence that we know for a fact how it has impacted people and how it has caused change. And it's because of the reaction to the video. And some of these jurors had never seen it before, and they saw it for the first time in the courtroom. So the same impact that it had on you, me, cities across the country, cities around the world, it will have on that jury. So that's advantage prosecution. But as I listened to all these witnesses testify about what they saw, what they heard, how they felt, what they would have done, etc., there's one piece, and Michael touched on it a little bit. There's one piece of evidence that is just not that evident in this case, and that is Derek Chauvin's state of mind when it comes to the intent element that is necessary for second-degree murder. When you're a prosecutor, you're going for the top charge. That's what your case is about. Your case is about the top charge. Your case isn't about the middle charge or the bottom charge. Because if it was, then you wouldn't have charged the top charge, okay? It's that simple. You charge someone with first-degree murder, and they're also charged with assault and robbery. The case is not about assault and robbery. The case is about first-degree murder. Well, here, the top charge is second-degree murder. It is like felony murder in any other state. They call it second-degree unintentional murder in Minnesota. And as part of that, you've got to prove an underlying felony. Here, it's a third-degree assault. So they've got to prove an intentional bodily harm, okay? That there was an intent to cause bodily harm by Derek Chauvin. That's an element. You've got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Not just, I think he did that, or he probably wanted to do that. No, he absolutely wanted to do that. And in his opening statement, the prosecutor said, intent will be sprinkled throughout. Well, to me, that was a big red flag when I heard that. And now as the evidence is coming in, that red flag is still waving. Because to prove this second degree, you've got to prove an intentional assault, okay? And where is that evidence coming from? It's difficult because if you talk about, the neck restraint, he should have stopped. Or he did it wrong. Or he should have rolled him over. Well, does that prove intent or does that prove negligence? What exactly does that prove? It's almost a toss-up. It could be this or it could be that. And when you have in a courtroom, it could be this or it could be that, and you're the prosecutor, that's called reasonable doubt. You can't you can't argue to a jury, well, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, look at his actions and come on, he probably intended to hurt him. It looked like he wanted to hurt him. No, you've got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that he intended to hurt him. And intent sometimes is difficult to prove. Sometimes it's not difficult to prove, right? Sometimes the action itself, like there's no, like if you take a gun, point it at someone, say, I'm going to kill you, and you squeeze the trigger, and you've got it on video, intent is easy to prove, right? But here you're in an area of mishmash because he's a police officer on duty trying to arrest someone, right? So it's not like he met a stranger and threw handcuffs on him and put him on the ground, right? If it was me and it wasn't a police officer and I just came across someone and I put handcuffs on him and I threw him on the ground, I got a couple of my friends and I held him down. That's one thing because I'm not a police officer. I'm not doing my job. I'm not putting someone under arrest. So already you've got this situation where there are different explanations for the actions. Like he's handcuffing him because he's under arrest. He's putting him down in the prone position because George Floyd did not cooperate to get into the squad car like they originally tried to do. So now you've got to go from where you are in that situation to try to prove that he's intending to cause bodily harm to George Floyd. He wants to assault him. And that's the only explanation that is reasonable. Okay? That's the key. It has to be the only reasonable explanation. It can't be one of two or one of three or one of four. The only. And I'm not seeing that because a lot of the testimony and evidence, even from the prosecution, is that, yeah, there's some training. Yeah, you could do this maneuver, but then you stop or you do this. So that could be explained by, well, he's not doing it correctly. He went too long. Well, he went too long. That's negligently doing the police training restraint that you learned to do, right? I could prove that, but can I prove that he intended to? And that's where you need something more. And that's my fear for prosecutors when it comes to second-degree murder, is the intent element is going to be absolutely difficult. Absolutely difficult. Because you're asking the jury to read his mind. And he's not going to testify. I don't think he's going to. Sometimes that can come out through cross-examination. You can reveal his true motives in all of it. But it's going to be tough because of the whole situation. And it's not just this case. It's most cases involving police officers who are doing their job when things go south and they end up getting indicted for whatever they did. Because the whole situation started lawfully in that, hey, he's doing his job as a police officer, and then this happened. It's not like he got into a fight with a stranger or he abducted a stranger or he attacked a stranger. No, he was doing his job first, and then they've got to prove at some point during all of this, it shifts. And all of a sudden, his mindset goes from, I'm a police officer arresting someone, to, I want to hurt this man. I want to commit an assault. That's the challenge for the prosecution. All right, folks, here's the challenge for you. You know, we are live gavel to gavel with our coverage Monday through Friday, starting 9 o'clock in the morning. But maybe you missed some of the testimony. Maybe you missed some of the testimony during the week, and you can't even catch my show from 8 to 11 every night. Well, every weekend, we are doing sort of a catch-up for you this week in the Derek Chauvin trial, where you can see all the big moments from all week, back to back to back to back, and really get a flavor and a feel for what's happening in the trial and in the case. And if you have a digital antenna and you can't find CourtTV, the network, please rescan that antenna and you will find us. In the meantime, a lot of coverage still ahead. Make sure you're watching. We will be back next week with another podcast taking you inside the courtroom with our analysis. In the meantime, I'm Vinnie Politan. Have a great week. And as always, don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of CourtTV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch CourtTV in your area.